I never planned to tell this story, not because I forgot it, but because forgetting was the only way I survived it. My name is Lester Hanley, and I was a forest ranger for just over 27 years. I signed my first logbook in the late 60s and closed my last one in 1988. What I'm about to tell you was never written down. Not officially. Not in any report that still exists. And if you were to pull the archives today, you'd find gaps where my handwriting should be. That was the rule. Some things went in the log, some things stayed in your head, and some things were taken from both. People think ranger work is solitude and scenery, quiet patrols, campfire warnings, lost hikers. That's what we let them think. But the truth is, the forest keeps its own records. It remembers every footstep, every scream, every mistake. And sometimes it decides what gets erased. In the spring of 1988, I was 3 months from retirement. My knees were bad, my hearing worse, and my patience completely gone. I'd started counting my days by the number of patrols left. I had a cardboard box under my desk already, half filled with old maps, a cracked thermos, and a flashlight I'd carried since Reagan's first term. That was when the sector showed up. Not on the map, off it. I noticed it during a routine update. We used paper maps back then, thick ones with grease pencil markings layered over years of patrol routes. I spread one across the hood of my truck, smoothing it out like I'd done 1,000 times before. But something felt wrong. A familiar ridge line didn't line up. A creek I knew by heart simply ended. At first I blamed the print. Revisions happened. But when I pulled an older map from my glove box, one I'd marked myself in '82, the area was there. Clear as day. A stretch of timber and ravine spanning roughly 6 square miles. No name, just boundary hash marks and a few faded notes in my own hand. On the newer map, it was gone. No white space, no relabel, just forest that no longer existed on paper. I took it inside and laid both maps on the desk. The office was quiet except for the hum of the radio charger. I checked the date stamps, the revision numbers. The new map was official, stamped, approved. The old one, still valid, at least it should have been. I brought it up to my supervisor that afternoon. He didn't look surprised. "Maps change," he said, not meeting my eyes. "That creek didn't move," I replied. He sighed like I was asking about overtime pay. "Some areas are reclassified. You don't need to worry about it." That was my first mistake, thinking worry was optional. 2 weeks later, I got assigned a patrol route that cut the edge of that missing sector. No written order, just a verbal instruction over the analog radio while I was checking tire pressure. "Hanley, take the southern loop today, and don't cross the marker trees." I paused. Which marker trees? "Static, then, you'll know them." That answer sat wrong in my gut all day. The marker trees weren't on any map. They never were. But every ranger knew them. 3 old pines bent inward like they were listening to each other. Strips of faded red cloth were tied around their trunks, replaced every few years without anyone admitting who did it. We weren't supposed to go past them. Officially, it was due to erosion. Unofficially, nobody wanted to explain why compasses spun and radios crackled when you got too close. I chalked it up to mineral deposits. Old ranger superstition. Things you laugh about until you don't. That afternoon, I parked the truck just short of the trees and stepped out with my logbook tucked under my arm. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind. Even my boots sounded wrong on the dirt, like the ground was packed tighter than it should have been. I made my notes quickly. Weather clear, no visible fire risk, no foot traffic. Then I saw the tape. A strip of yellow evidence tape, snagged on a low branch just beyond the marker trees. Fresh, bright, the kind we only used when something had gone very wrong. My name was on the assignment roster, but nobody had told me about an incident. I radioed in. "Base, this is Hanley. I'm seeing evidence tape near the southern markers. Was there a recovery out here?" The response took longer than it should have. Finally, "Negative, stand by." I waited. The radio hissed softly like breathing. Then a different voice came through, lower, careful. "Hanley, return to your vehicle." "I haven't crossed." "Return now." I should have listened. Instead, I stepped closer, just enough to read the writing on the tape. Black marker, block letters. "Property of U.S. Forest Service. Do not remove." Below it, barely visible, was a second line, faded, scratched out. A ranger's badge number. One I recognized. That was the moment I realized something had happened out there that never made it into the logbooks. Something that had been collected, tagged, and then forgotten on purpose. "T." He radio crackled again. "Hanley, last warning." I turned back toward the truck, but the forest behind me didn't look the same as it had 5 minutes earlier. The light had shifted. The shadows were longer, and somewhere beyond the marker trees, something moved that didn't sound like an animal walking away. It sounded like something waiting. I stood there longer than I want to admit, keys clenched in my hand, listening to that sound fade back into the timber, waiting for it to come closer, waiting for it to explain itself. It didn't. The forest went still again, like it had reset itself. Birds came back one by one, cautiously, as if testing whether it was safe to exist. My radio crackled once more, but this time there was no voice, just a low, uneven hiss that made my teeth ache. I got in the truck and drove back without finishing the patrol. No one asked why. That should tell you everything you need to know. The next morning I checked the incident board. Blank. No missing ranger notices, no recovery operations, no taped-off sectors. Whatever that evidence tape belonged to, it wasn't meant to exist anymore. But I knew the badge number. It belonged to Evan Mercer. Younger guy. Quiet. Smart. Had a habit of logging too much detail, tree patterns, soil shifts, animal behavior that didn't fit the books. We used to joke that if the forest ever tried to hide something, Evan would notice first. He'd been reassigned the previous fall, officially transferred to another district. No farewell, no card, just gone. I pulled his old logbooks from storage that afternoon. They were kept in a metal cabinet in the records room, the kind that smelled like dust and cold steel. Most of the spines were cracked, pages yellowed and stiff. Evan's book stood out. Neat handwriting, precise timestamps. I flipped to his last month on duty. Entry stopped mid-sentence. Not the dramatic kind of stop you'd expect. No bloodstain, no torn page, just a line that ended where the pen lifted and never came back down. Tree line changes abruptly past. That was it. No signature, no closing note. I checked the following pages. Blank, like the rest of the book had never been used. I brought it to my supervisor. He didn't touch it. "Those records were archived incorrectly," he said. Then, why is his badge number on evidence tape in a restricted sector? He finally looked at me then. Really looked. The way men do when they're deciding how much truth you're allowed to carry. "You're too close to retirement to be asking these questions, Lester." That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the marker trees bending inward, like fingers curled around a secret. I kept thinking about Evan, about how he noticed patterns, about how his notes always went further than protocol required, about how something had noticed him back. 2 days later, I was called in early, before dawn. The office lights were already on, casting long shadows across the parking lot. My truck was the only one there. Inside, 2 men I didn't recognize were waiting. They wore plain jackets, no badges visible. One of them held a folder, thick, the kind you don't see unless something's gone very wrong. "We have a task for you," the taller one said. "Unofficial." That word again. They told me there had been reports, unexplained disturbances near the southern sector, equipment malfunction, visual anomalies, animal remains found arranged in ways that didn't align with predation. They didn't say how they were arranged. They didn't have to. "You're familiar with the area," the shorter one said. "We want you to verify a location." "Verify what?" He slid a photograph across the table. It was black and white, grainy, taken at night with a flash. The image showed the marker trees, but closer than I'd ever seen them. Their trunks were scarred with symbols carved deep into the bark, not letters, not symbols from any language I knew. Between the trees stood something tall and indistinct, blurred by motion or by design. It didn't have clear edges. The light bent around it wrong, like it was refusing to be captured fully. "What am I looking at?" I asked. The taller man hesitated, something that shouldn't be there. I went back out at first light. This time I crossed the marker trees. The air changed immediately, heavier, like humidity without heat. My compass spun uselessly, needles circling as if searching for a direction that no longer applied. The radio went dead, not static, just silence. The forest beyond didn't follow the same rules. Trees grew closer together, their branches knitting overhead in unnatural symmetry. The ground dipped and rose in shallow waves, like something had passed beneath it recently. I found the site from the photograph. The carvings were fresh, and beneath them, partially covered by pine needles, was a canvas bag. Evidence storage, standard issue. Inside were photographs, film negatives, and a small notebook W. Wrapped in plastic, Evan's handwriting stared back at me from the first page. He documented everything. Shapes in the fog that held their position when he moved. Sounds that responded, not echoed but answered. And always the same note, repeated in different words. "It learns faster the longer you stay." The last page was worse. "It doesn't chase. It waits for you to realize you've already crossed the line." That was when I heard it again, that patient, deliberate sound behind me, not footsteps, not breathing. Something aligning itself with my presence. I turned slowly. The forest between the trees looked thinner, like a curtain pulled just enough to show there was more behind it. The light dimmed without clouds. The space ahead felt occupied in the same way a room does when someone stands just out of sight. I backed away, step by careful step, clutching Evan's notebook to my chest. And just before I crossed back past the marker trees, I felt it, an awareness slide off me, like losing pressure in your ears. As if whatever had been watching decided for now to let me go. By the time I returned to the office, the 2 men were gone. So was the folder. So was Evan's logbook from the cabinet. All that remained was the notebook in my hands, and the knowledge that it wouldn't stay that way for long. I didn't keep Evan's notebook at home. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I locked it in my desk drawer at the station, under a stack of outdated permit forms no one had touched in years. I told myself it was safer there, inside the system but buried in it. That lie lasted exactly 12 hours. When I came in the next morning, the drawer was open. No sign of forced entry, no disturbance. The papers were still stacked neatly, just as I'd left them. The notebook was gone, but in its place sat something that hadn't been there before. A single sheet of paper. Not typed, handwritten. My handwriting. It was an incident report dated 5 years earlier, describing a routine patrol near the southern sector. I recognized the words, the phrasing, the slant of the letters. I'd written it. I was sure of that. What I wasn't sure of was when. Because at the bottom of the page, where my signature should have been, was a sentence I had no memory of writing. Evidence recovered, evidence returned. I felt cold then, not the shiver kind, but the deep, hollow kind that settles in your bones when you realize time isn't behaving the way you were taught it should. I asked for the original report from archives. It didn't exist. Neither did the patrol. Neither, apparently, did Evan Mercer. When I pushed harder, I was pulled into a closed-door meeting. Same supervisor, same tired look. He didn't bother denying anything anymore. "You were never meant to hold onto proof," he said quietly. "None of us are. Then why send us out there at all?" He rubbed his temples. "Because it stays calmer when it's watched, logged, acknowledged even if unofficially." That was the closest I ever got to an explanation. My retirement paperwork came through early. No celebration, no handshake, just a thin envelope and instructions to clear out my desk by the end of the week. On my last patrol, I drove the southern loop one final time. The marker trees were still there, older somehow. Their bark thicker, the red cloth replaced with a darker strip I didn't recognize. I didn't cross them. I didn't need to. From where I stood, I could feel it again, that awareness. Not hostile, not curious. Patient. Like a librarian waiting for a book to be returned. Years passed. I told myself I'd let it go. Built a life small enough that nothing followed me home. But every so often, I'd find things misplaced. Old maps with sections missing. Radio parts arranged neatly on a table I didn't remember touching. And always, that phrase would surface in my mind, uninvited. Evidence returned. I understand now what it means. The forest doesn't destroy proof. It reclaims it, slowly, quietly, through systems and people and memory itself. Anything taken too far from where it belongs finds its way back, or is made to never have left at all. That's why I'm telling you this now. Because I don't have much time left, and because words spoken aloud are harder to erase than ink on paper. If you ever find yourself in a place that isn't on the map, if your radio goes silent without explanation, if you see marker trees where no boundaries should exist, don't cross them. And if you do, don't take anything with you. Some evidence was never meant to disappear. It's meant to wait.